Hey everybody, and welcome back to the shop. Well, in the last one we put the roof bar in. Today we're going to move forward and check out a dash bar. Welcome to the Kiefer's Hot Rod Shop YouTube channel. I'm Nick Kiefer. Hey guys, and welcome back. Well, like I said earlier, we're going to take a look at putting a bar in the dash area of the Chevelle today. And this is something that's required for all 25.5, 25.2, 25.3 cages. But also, if you've got an 850 cage, you need one if you've modified your firewall. Now, in this case, it needs to be 1.25 inch chromoly tubing. And if I was interrupting the A-pillar bars with it, it'd have to be at least 1.5 inches. So since these are continuous all the way to the floor from the roof or vice versa, that can be 1.25 inches, which makes it a little easier to fit. But what we'll mostly be checking out today is just kind of the process of planning the tube, and we'll take a look at the obstacles I need to work around and just kind of look at how it needs to fit. Then we'll go next door, make it, bend it, notch it, and we'll check out how it fits in the car after all that. So looking in here at the dash area of the Chevelle, the first thing that I need to consider is that the owner of the car wants most of the factory dash componentry intact and functional. So that includes the instrument cluster and glove box and other things like that. So I'm going to make sure that the bar kind of fits around everything like that and leaves it alone. Another thing that I really want to do with this bar is make it so that the steering column can still drop down out from the dash area when it's unbolted and removed. And that's just so that it doesn't have to kind of be fished between the pedal box and this structure and that bar. I'd much rather be able to just simply unbolt it, drop it out of the way, and be able to put it back in just as easily. So I'm going to be sending the bar over the column at some point. Also, the factory brake light switch back here, it's going to need a little room. Those stick out pretty far. So that's a couple obstacles kind of in the same area that I'm kind of working around. But as we move over to the glove box side, I'm also going to want to leave some room for an air conditioning air box. Now, we don't have that right now, and it is currently deleted, but down the road the owner of the car is interested in possibly putting AC back in the car. So I want to make sure that I leave enough room in this area to put a box in and, you know, route whatever kind of ducting or wiring needs to be done. Also, the factory ashtray resides right here, so I'll make sure there's plenty of room for that. And the other thing that I'm concerned with is the factory emergency parking brake release lever, or release handle, that is. So I'm going to want to work around all of those objects. I've decided that I'll be putting that bar below everything else. So we'll be able to reinstall the factory cluster just as intended, along with the glove box door and everything like that. This car has plenty of room between the floor and the dash, the bottom of the dash, for your feet and shins and everything like that. So it shouldn't be a problem putting that bar nice and tight up against the bottom of the dash. And I'll have to hop it up to go over the steering column. I'm going to keep that kind of tight back to the rear, or kind of the front looking at the dash. I'm going to keep it nice and tight to give plenty of room for that brake light switch. And then I'm going to lead it across and then move it back out to catch that other A-pillar bar over there. You might also notice this column is adjustable height-wise. So I'm going to try to give it plenty of room to adjust. If he ends up wanting it a little higher or lower later, lower shouldn't matter. But if he needs it just a little bit higher, I'll try to leave some room for that. So considering all those parameters, I'm going to go ahead and start making some measurements. All right, so as I get under the dash of this thing to start measuring everything out and planning the path of the tube, it's really helpful to have a sample of the tubing you're going to make the bar out of. This is some 1.25 inch, just cut off from another project. And what I'm doing is I'm just kind of guiding it through the path that tube is going to take, keeping in mind all the obstacles and also bend centerline radius and just different clearances and fitments that I need to achieve. Another thing that I have to keep in mind is not only bend centerline radius, but also the distance required between bends. And with my bender, that's a little over 4 inches. So I can't just make a perfect S-curve. I have to consider how much space I have between curves and how much space the curves themselves will take up. And when I find a spot I'm really happy with, where the tube is going to fit best, what I can do is measure between the rear edge of this tube and the string. Now, you might notice this string is resting against the front edge of the A-pillar, and that is on both sides, so it's nice and even going across the car. And that's important so that I know when I measure between the back of this tube and that, I can add the radius, or half of the distance across this tube as well as that tube, keeping in mind that they're both different sizes. That's 1 5/8 and this is 1 1/4. But then when I add all those numbers up, I get the center line to center line distance between these tubes, which will help me design the final bends and the final shape of this tube going in the car. So, you know, basically, long story short, I'm just using that string as a reference to measure everything off of. And what I'll also do is I've measured everything out from the frame rail on either side, and I know that this string is also level going across the car. And so what I can do is just kind of in a similar fashion, I'll go ahead and figure out at what height I'm running this bar. So say maybe the top of the bars line up with the string, or 1/4 inch below, or you know, whatever it may be. And I'll also be able to get all the measurements to design the kind of the height of the bar at any given point. One of the great things about this tube is it needs to fit between 2 parallel bars. So if I need to adjust it up or down just a little bit, that won't be a problem. I can fine tune it after I get it made and notched and everything, just to fit where it's both below all of the items of the dash, but also above this column. So I'll measure everything out, get it all written down, and then I can design the tube, and we'll go next door and bend it up after that. All right, so before we go and make the tubing over in my shop, I want to just briefly go over some of the math I did to design the tube. And this is where I started. So I kind of came up with this basic line drawing denoting the topography of the tube, so where it has to go up over the steering column, back down under the rest of the dash. And this is just kind of looking on from behind the dash, so this only shows the difference in height for the design. What I did to make it fit kind of in front of the A-pillar bars, because it needs to go forward of between the A-pillar bars to fit nicely under the dash and go over the column and everything. What I did is I went ahead and I found the distance between that string that went in front of the A-pillar bars and between that string and the little sample of tubing that I was positioning under the dash to determine where I wanted the actual dash bar to end up. And that distance turned out to be 3 3/16 of an inch. And so I added both radii of both tubes to that, the 13/16 of the A-pillar bar and the 5/8 of the dash bar. which is 1.25 bar, an 1 5/8 bar. And I got 4 5/8 of an inch. And so what I did with that is I made this arc considering that the radius is going to be the centerline radius of my bend is dictated by my bending die for 1 1/4 tubing, which is 5.5 inches. So I made this arc and I moved it down that 4 5/8 of an inch, and using trigonometry I determined that it's going to leave me with I rounded it to 81 degrees. It's 80.84586671536.127 degrees. So again, I rounded that to 81 degrees, and an 81 degree arc will take the tube from the center line of the A-pillar bar up to the distance I want it in front of the A-pillar bar on either side. So kind of moving on from that, I needed to figure out how the arcs of the rest of the bar go. So what I did is I determined that from the center line of the A-pillar bar, the driver's side A-pillar bar, to the center line of the steering column is 11.5 inches, and I want the bar 4 1/4 inches higher at that point than where it meets the A-pillar bar. And so I did kind of a tricky thing here where I created an arc and then I populated this drawing with all my known dimensions, so the 5.5 inch center line bending radius, as well as this 11.5. I know that my center line bend radius will be 1 1/4 more than the actual height difference here. So I was able to just kind of populate this, calculate everything out using trigonometry, and I actually figured out that I'll need like a 10.17656621 straight at this point, and I also figured out that I'll need just over a 22 degree bend to make that all work. And so kind of the next section I worked on is actually the kind of the middle of the bar, where it comes back down from going over the steering column, and then it goes down to the height that the bar will be the rest of the way across the car, going all the way over to the passenger side A-pillar bar. I went ahead and I just used that same arc that I calculated out here, just kind of for symmetry, and I multiplied the height that curve will take up times 2 and subtracted that from the entire height of this area here, and that gave me this height. And then using this angle, I calculated out the travel left to right, and also the straightaway length here between the two bends. And then I just finished off with that second bend that we already know the height and width of. And so that gave me, I already knew, from the driver's side A-pillar to the column, and that gave me column to the point at which this is level again. And so then I just had to carry on level across the car over to the passenger side, which will use the same arc, driver side and passenger side, to get that bar back to the A-pillar bar, that 81 degree kind of arc that establishes the spacing forward of the A-pillars in the car. So the tricky part of all this was, in the straightaway on the left side, I actually need to include that curve back to the A-pillar. So I had to calculate out how that was going to meet up with the driver's side A-pillar, at what angle. Since it's not a 90 degree arc, just an 81, it's going to kind of come in with a little bit of an attitude, leaning at an angle, meeting that A-pillar bar at kind of a funky angle. So I had to figure out what that would be. and kind of all that stuff. And here's kind of a loose drawing of that. And after I figured that out, I went ahead and came up with the final design of the tube. So as you can see, here's my 81-degree bend on the end. Calculated out roughly 4 3/4 inch straightaway here, a 44 3/8 degree bend, 5 and roughly 1/8 of an inch straightaway, a 22.19 degree bend, and then it goes straight kind of under the glove box area. And here's my second 81-degree arc back to the A-pillar bar on the passenger side of the car. So that's just kind of a basic look over how I figured it out. Obviously there's a lot of math and stuff that I didn't go all the way through, but that just kind of shows the process of how I figured out how to get this where I need it. So let's go over to my shop and cut out a piece of tubing and start bending and notching. Back over here in my shop, and I've got the 1 1/4 058 chromoly tubing pulled out. Gonna go ahead and cut just about 6 feet off of there, and we'll start bending it up and notching it on the time lapse. We'll check it out in the car after that. All right, cool. So as you just saw, been up and notched this tube, and I did a kind of a interesting order of events with this one. I went ahead and made this notch here on, that's actually the driver's side. I made that before I made the last bend, just because I wanted to be able to get a precise measurement. And once I make that bend and notch it, that's pretty much it. I mean, I can fine tune a little bit, but it's pretty determined by the geometry of the bends and notches. But anyway, you also probably saw me taking a measurement between these two tubes, and these tubes are just sitting in the notches, and I was just verifying that I had the right spacing. These are representing the A-pillar bars. I also have a bunch of things that I've been kind of setting up under the tube to get it to sit level, as it kind of will in the car, as I mock all that up and measure it as well. But this thing's looking good, so all that's left is to check it out in the car. Let's go over there and look at that. All right, cool. So I've got the dash bar all mocked up in the car, and I just went ahead and I taped it into place just so you guys can kind of see how it fits. I kind of have to fish it through the column and all this to get it in place, so just went ahead and taped it up. But as you can see, you know, it goes over the column nicely, and it's kind of sagging a little bit on the tape right now, but you can still get an idea how everything fits. The emergency parking brake, all that stuff, the release and the pedal all has clearance, so that's awesome. Also, the brake light switch, the factory plug might not quite fit on there, but you could get a couple of terminals on there if need be. Still have to fine tune this a little bit, but at the very least it looks like it'll work, maybe just with some aftermarket spade terminals. And then you can see how it fits on the passenger side as well. Kept it nice and level, kind of under the glove box area. But something that's really kind of cool is if you look at it kind of as if you're sitting in the car, it's pretty invisible under there, especially when I have the cluster and all that stuff, the glove box door and all that in. It's nice and out of the way. The one thing that I'm kind of hopeful for is that if this ever does get a AC box, I'm hoping it clears that. This thing is kind of far back under the dash, which is nice interior space wise, but for installing an air box it might be a little tight, but there's a good amount of room in here, so hopefully that'll be sufficient. But otherwise this thing's looking really good. I need to clean the notches up just a little bit, just to fine tune them so they sit on both A-pillars nice and square. So we'll do that real quick. It'll be time to go ahead and do a final mock-up, clean up these A-pillars, drill the gas expansion holes, and go ahead and tack it in after that. All right, cool. So got the dash bar back in the Chevelle here, and I've got it all taped into place, and the notches are looking really great actually. And here's the other side. So you can see it's pretty tight. The bar needs just maybe a little more support with the tape. It droops down pretty quickly after I get it all taped up anyway, but that's looking good. So now all that's left is I need to go ahead, pull the tube back out, polish where it sits on the A-pillar bars on both sides, drill the gas expansion holes through the A-pillar bars, clean everything up, then get it tacked in. So let's check that out next. What I'm doing is I'm just taking the Sharpie and tracing around where the dash bar sits on the A-pillar bar, just so I know where to drill the gas expansion hole and where to polish the A-pillar bar. Alright, now go ahead and get the passenger side as well. Make sure that's marked nicely around the tube. Cool. All right, great. So as you just saw, went ahead and after I got this thing all cleaned up and polished up, I did wipe it all down with acetone, the A-pillar bars as well as the dash bar inside and out. Got it all cleaned up and it's in. Just time to tack it in, but it's looking really great. Nice and tight under there. And kind of the beauty of this design is I can actually go ahead and tack it in now. All I have to do is drop the column and I can actually go ahead and pick the body up off of the frame to finish the welds in the roof area and some of the welds that I need to get to from the bottom around the outside of these tubes that meet the frame. And it'll be able to just drop down with everything else. And then I'll be able to get to these welds better with everything dropped down. I'll be able to weld it in. But that's looking awesome. Now it's just time to go ahead and stick a couple tacks on it and it'll be a done deal. Alright, sweet. Well, got it tacked in on both sides and I'm just leaving it with one tack for right now. I still want to look over a few things and just make sure it's exactly in right how I want it, nice and level and in the right place. But it's looking good and it's definitely part of the cage now. And you can see just just how it fits around everything. Plenty of clearance for the steering column, and also you can get to that brake light switch. I don't think the factory connector will work. Maybe if I turn this sideways 90 degrees, but I'll mess with that and figure that out. You can see the parking brake release and pedal and everything fits in there. It's tight, but it's all there. You get to it, get to the pedal even, so that's kind of cool. The owner of the car wants to implement that. So we go across. The ashtray even fits in there nicely. Fits nicely up under the glove box area, and then just curves back, connects to the A-pillar over there. When you look at it from above, it's all nice and out of the way. So it's looking really good. I think it's going to work great. So let's go ahead and check it all out. Well, I really hope you guys enjoyed this look into the build process and installation of the dash bar in the Chevelle Project here. Still plenty to do on this car, and hope you guys are looking forward to all that. It's almost time to pick the body up and finish the welds in the roof area and some of the welds where these roll bar tubes go down and meet the original chassis of the car. So we'll check that out soon. Until then, thank you guys for watching, liking, and subscribing. Take care, and we'll see you next time.